Hello, I'm John Ohmer, the Interim Dean at All Souls Cathedral in Asheville, North Carolina. Welcome to another installment of Theological Thursdays. Last Thursday I talked about Ignatian Spirituality, and I wanted to build a little bit more on that. Ironically, I talked about Ignatian Spirituality as being a very practical spirituality and vaguely said that there are more resources for you to check out Ignatian Spirituality if you want to. But I thought I'd offer some practical help in doing that for those of you who are interested. A bit of a disclaimer, I'm no expert on Ignatian Spirituality. It is the way that I have been praying probably for more than 25 years, and I've had the good fortune of having Jesuit spiritual directors the entire time I've been in ordained ministry since 1994, but that doesn't make me an expert. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things I've learned is how much of a beginner I am, not only in my knowledge of Ignatian spirituality, but in my knowledge of God and of how to love God, love my neighbor, and love myself. So with that disclaimer about my not being an expert, I do want to share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way, some of the resources that I've used along the way, in hopes that they may be helpful to those of you who want to dig a little deeper in Ignatian spirituality. If you want a general introduction, and by the way, as I hold up these books, if you're interested, don't worry about jotting them down. There will be a bibliography in the email that is being pushed, as well as in the YouTube, where you can click on that and find a document with the names of all these titles that I've written down. But if you want a general introduction, this one, What is Ignatian Spirituality, is a pretty good one. My favorite probably is by William Barry and Robert Doherty. These are, by the way, all these books are written by Jesuits about Jesuits or about Ignatian spirituality. Contemplatives in Action, the Jesuit Way, is a marvelous, and you can see a little small book. Another very good way to dig a bit deeper from the general introduction to Ignatian spirituality is really anything written by William Barry. The classic is Finding God in All Things, which is a pretty good summary of Ignatian spirituality in general, seeking God in all things and all circumstances. God's Passionate Desire and Our Response is another classic by him. And then Paying Attention to God, which I want to talk a little bit more about in this installment of Theological Thursday. Paying Attention to God, Discernment in Prayer. Paying attention to God probably is so central to not just Ignatian prayer, but any kind of prayer. How do we pay attention? How do we pay more attention? Tony Mello, who many of you may be familiar with in this little marvelous book called 1 Minute Wisdom, he writes this marvelous little reflection, and it's titled Presence, and he has the person saying, where shall I look for enlightenment? But you could really substitute any other word. Where should I look for happiness? Where can I look for contentment? Where can I look for peace? Where can I look for courage? Where can I look for God's presence? And so this is how it goes. Where shall I look for enlightenment? Here. When will it happen? It is happening right now. Then why don't I experience it? Because you do not look. What should I look for? Nothing. Just look. At what? Anything your eyes alight upon. Must I look in a special kind of way? No, the ordinary way will do. But don't I always look the ordinary way? No. Why ever not? Because to look, you must be here. You're mostly somewhere else. Wow. What a... sometimes that just hits you hard. And is a reminder of how easy it is to get distracted, of how easy it is to be taken away someplace else than the time that you have in prayer, that the time you have with the person with whom you're speaking, the conversation that you're on the phone, the work that you're engaged in, with so many things pulling at our attention. it is so important to be reminded that in order to find God's presence, in order to find peace, contentment, enlightenment, and so forth, we don't need to look in a special way. We need to look in the ordinary way, but we need to be where we are. Age quod agis, and apologies if I mispronounced that Latin, age quod agis, Agequodagis, means do what you're doing. Basically, be where you are, do what you are doing. And that's such a huge part of not only, again, Ignatian prayer, but so many other kinds of prayers, the importance of presence. And I want to say a little bit more about that in this installment because it is so important. And while those are books by Jesuits about Ignatian spirituality, I find that one of the best ways to discover what Ignatian spirituality is all about is by reading other people, and the classic and Lamott, Bird by Bird, a book about writing, but really a book about being present, a book about paying attention. Just listen to what she says about the difficulty of paying attention when she sits down to write. Often when you sit down to write, what you have in mind is an autobiographical novel about your childhood, or a play about the immigrant experience, or a history of, say, women. But this is like trying to scale a glacier. It's hard to get your footing, and your fingertips get all red and frozen and torn up. Then your mental illnesses arrive at the desk like your sickest, most secretive relatives. And they pull up chairs in a semicircle around the computer, and they try to be quiet, but they're there with their weird coppery breath, leering at you behind your back. When you sit down to write, when you sit down to pray, your mental illnesses, your insecurities, everything else just circles around you. And that's one of the things, one of the challenges. And she goes on to write about this several chapters later in what she calls radio station KFKD. I need to bring up radio station KFKD, or KF. It is perhaps the single greatest obstacle to listening to what I will call your still small voice, because she's got an inside joke here, but it is perhaps the greatest single obstacle to focusing, to praying. If you're not careful, station KFKD will play in your head 24 hours a day, nonstop in stereo. Out of the right speaker in your inner ear will come the endless stream of self-aggrandizement, the recitation of one's specialness, of how much more open and gifted and brilliant and knowing and misunderstood and humble one is. Out of the left speaker will be the rap songs of self-loathing, the lists of all the things one doesn't do well, all the mistakes one has made today and over an entire lifetime, the doubt, the assertion that everything that one touches turns to shit, that one doesn't do relationships well, that one is in every way a fraud, incapable of selfless love, that one has no talent or insight, and on and on. You might as well have heavy metal music piped in through headphones while you're trying to get your work done. You have to get things quiet in your head. The best way to get quiet, other than a combination of extensive therapy, Prozac, and a lobotomy, is first to notice that the station is on. KFKD is on every single morning when I sit down at my desk. Those distractions, in the gospel for this upcoming Sunday, Jesus says, I have come that you may have life abundantly. The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Our joy, our concentration, our focus is opposed. God wants that for us, but it doesn't. It's not like it doesn't come automatically to us. We have to struggle for it. So paying attention and recognizing that these voices, these competing voices, these clattering monkeys in our heads are there is the first step in helping ourselves to focus. So when we are able to spend some time recognizing that those voices are there and clearing out the time and struggling through some of that, then we begin to hear what's described as God's still small voice. Remember the story of of God not being in the earthquake or in the storm or in the noise and in the grandeur, but God's voice is like a still small voice. It is a whisper. It is the sound of sheer silence. And so sometimes we have to struggle through some of those background noises in order to hear that voice. And then to pay attention how God has been present in our day with some of those spiritual exercises that I talked about last week. So those are a couple of writers who talk about the importance of focus. And then other writers that I have found very useful in actually not just talking about prayer, but writing in such a way that it's evident that they are so focused and so that they pay such good attention to life, that they have such high EQs, that they have such good radars about what's actually going on in the world and not just stale opinions about the world. Some of those writers, anything by Glennon, Doyle. I started following her way back when she was just writing her blog Monastery, and her raw honesty about that. And then, of course, she's now, 3 weeks in a row, New York Times #1 bestseller with her book Untamed. The one before that, Love Warrior, highly recommend that. And again, authors, women that you're very familiar with, Brene Brown, daring greatly, remarkable insights into the human condition. Also, for those of you wrestling with the mixed blessing or curse of perfectionism, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, again, just such a classic and potentially life-altering book. And then, God, may she rest in peace, Rachel Held Evans. When she died young, the world lost a breath of fresh air and a fresh voice about Christianity. Just the way that she writes and the way that she observes, she just remarkable. This is just one of her books, Searching for Sunday. And then the final piece, the final author I would recommend, another brilliant book, is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. She has a couple of great suggestions in that book about, for example, morning pages, the importance of 3 pages of a stream of consciousness longhand, first thing in the morning, to get rid of, as she says, the jetsam and the flotsam of the past day, just cleaning one's head of all that stuff. I do find that starting my day on the days, I try to do them every day, but on the days that I do write my morning pages, I find that I am much better able later in my time of prayer to concentrate and to focus and to hear the still small voice, because I've gotten some of those clattering monkeys down on paper and written it all out through the exercise of stream of consciousness, longhand writing of 3 pages. But really, the most important thing, I just rattled through 8 or 10 books. Reading about prayer won't make any of us better at prayer any more than reading cookbooks will make us a better cook or chef. It's about doing. It's about actually, these are wonderful resources. I've used them. I keep them around. But the only way to, to make progress in the prayer life or in spirituality and in the faith is by doing it. And so perhaps the most important tool we have is our daily calendar. I have good old analog, full focus planner that I try to take notes in and keep my calendar in. I use this as well as, of course, electronic. This happens to be Fantasical is my calendar. I like the way that it helps me to see through my day and in a very visual way. And it's a tool for me between the journal, the analog journal, and of course on my iPhone. Again, by going back over the past day and asking, okay, where was God present? Where might I have paused to receive God's influence? And then in the upcoming day. So really the calendar, whether it's a paper calendar or on your phone or anything, your calendar might be the most important tool you have for finding God in all things, because it's about reflecting on the past 24 hours and anticipating the next 24 hours. I'm at the 15-minute mark, and I don't want to go longer than that. I don't want to test your attention spans, so I'll leave it there. Again, the bibliography will be available on the Constant Contact as a PDF that you can click on, as well as a link in the YouTube. I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you next Thursday for Theological Thursday. God bless. Take care.